it's kind of not sat well with me that the People's Party essentially of Britain, like the working class party, is now headed by someone with the title Sir Keir Starmer. And it kind of feels like the during the Brexit sort of debate from sort of 2016 to January, essentially, when we left, the idea was that the Labour Party was being held together by Jeremy Corbyn, that there was like the two wings. You had this like liberal wing, like a lot of young people, students, whatnot, who were very pro EU, and you had the sort of more traditional like trade union side of the Labour Party that were perhaps not as big fans of the EU, and that there was these two factions essentially, and it feels like with Kier Starmer now as leader, that sort of liberal, sort of untraditional side of Labour has kind of won out, and it feels like there's almost like their existence as an opposition to me seems to be just disappearing. Like their opposition to anything that the government does. Like what are your thoughts on how Kier Starmer is doing?
How is Kier Starmer doing as leader? Awful. I mean, really, really bad. He was elected on a platform of unity. He was promised to uphold 10 pledges, such as economic justice, which was the first one on there, yet he has opposed tax hikes on the wealthiest. He said he would promote peace and human rights, yet he abstained on the Covert Human Intelligence Sources Bill, the Spy Cops Bill, which authorized criminal conduct for the likes of undercover police. Such as he said he would help to strengthen workers' rights and trade unions, yet has done the opposite, driving the Bakers Union to consider disaffiliation from the party and unite the union to reduce its donations to the party. And the very last pledge, he said, was to provide effective opposition to the Tories. He has abstained repeatedly. He has backed chronic mistakes regarding the government response to the pandemic, including twice over backing the early return to schools for students, despite no additional measures being put in place. He has sacked members of his own party from frontbench positions for basically being left-wing under the guise of risible reasoning, such as retweeting somebody, yet has failed to once ever call for a Tory frontbencher to resign. Most notably, you could point the finger at Matt Hancock when the massive levels of corruption in his department's tendering processes were exposed. He said he didn't want him to resign. He's condemned Black Lives Matter as a moment, denigrating the struggle for equality amongst those communities. He promised not to impose candidates, yet on the first test, the by-election in Hartlepool, this has come to pass. And that's not mentioning the rigging of the Liverpool mayoral selection. He kicked Jeremy Corbyn out of the party despite an investigation exonerating him. He appointed a general secretary who was still only there in an acting capacity, since conference has not yet been held to confirm him in that position, who has embarked on a purge of left-wing members for daring to pass motions expressing solidarity or on subjects the leadership have deemed not competent business, despite no such term being described in the party rules. And there have been suspensions of officers and CLPs across the country for allowing such motions, and has allowed regional offices to take over with disastrous results. And in his latest example of capitulation to the Tories, he's agreed to back them in appointing commissioners to run Liverpool City Council for up to 3 years, despite Liverpool being the most Labour-centric city in the UK, and the Tories barely having a toehold there, all because of allegations of corruption. Now, when you have a government as blatantly corrupt as this one, for them to do such a thing is a height of hypocrisy. Labour will lose Liverpool like it lost Scotland. Backing them in doing this is not only not being an effective opposition, it's being on the same side as them, frankly. All of this and not one policy idea in a year in the job, and with local elections on the way, he is easily the weakest, worst Labour leader I've ever witnessed. How's that?
Well, that was a pretty comprehensive list of reasons he's not doing a great job. I will put links to all of the stuff you've mentioned there in the description below if anyone does not believe or wants to read further into anything you've said there. Right, so put on your cynical hat for a minute. You know, if you could stop giving him the benefit of the doubt for just like 30 seconds.
Bless you.
Yeah. Why is he doing this? Why has he just abandoned his promises? Why is he seemingly like kicking dirt in the face of half the party, most of whom are the activists who will theoretically go out or not, perhaps, given what he's done, and campaign for him on the doorstep. He's kicking mud in the faces of Momentum and everything they stand for, like the people who have been credited not just by the left but by a lot of very serious political commentators and analysts as the reason that Jeremy Corbyn did so well in getting such a high percentage of the vote, regardless of the smear campaigns being run against him. So why is Kier Starmer choosing to abandon all of this side of the party?
I think if I come back to Jeremy Corbyn for one moment, the biggest mistake Corbyn made was to not be aggressive enough with his constant critics. He sought too hard to make peace, to placate people that didn't want to be placated. And I think Keir Starmer has looked at that and thought, no, I don't want to deal with that. I want to nip things in the bud now. And he has gone on a rampage against the left wing of the party. Labour is a broad church, we keep hearing, and there are times, especially under this leadership, where I think it's too broad. We have, it just seems that he's just, from the moment he's come in, he's just gone to war on the left wing of his party to try and turn it into this permanently centrist, stands for nothing, Blairite era type party. And, bringing in Peter Mandelson recently kind of lends credence to that thinking. But the difference between Starmer and Blair is at least Blair had ideas. I mean, forget the Iraq war side of things for 1 minute. Tax credits came in under Blair, for example. This is a good idea. It lifted people out of poverty. Homelessness was massively reduced. It was a government that, his was a party that, although distasteful to a good many people, and certainly run by Starmer's faction of the party, it did have ideas, and it did realise that you need to lift the poorest and most vulnerable up. Even if it was only to a certain extent. But he still did a lot more than Starmer's ever put on the table and made an offer of. As I just said, a year into the job, he has not presented one single policy idea. Every time the government comes up with an idea, he decides, yes, we'll take a look at that, and either ends up backing it or abstaining on it. It took, look at the what happened in Clapham Common just recently, when the police were blatantly came in and started moving people at a peaceful vigil. It wasn't even a protest or anything like that. Until that moment happened, he was fully prepared to abstain again on removing our right to protest. It took that action to drag him kicking and screaming to a position of actually opposing. I really can't fathom why a year on and seeing himself sliding in the polls and having people leaving the party in disgust if they haven't been suspended already, why he thinks carrying on in the same vein he's doing is a good plan, is a great idea. He's often ribbed about listening too much to focus groups, and I fear he's not stopped listening to them. And the focus groups are telling him, "Yeah, you're doing great, Keir, fantastic, carry on." And it ain't happening. I think Labour are going to get a walloping in these upcoming local elections that are happening in May. And I think fundamentally, if that is what comes to pass, something has to be done about it, because we cannot continue to have a leader this week that offers so little and does not inspire anybody whatsoever. And I think it's probably going to be his own faction, the right wingers of the party, that realise that they're the ones that are going to have to act. I think they're going to see, they want power too. They want to be in government. They want to be running the party and running the country. That's not going to happen with a leader who continues to slide in the polls and does not bring people to the table. And so much so is he upsetting people that, and Labour effectively are abandoning so many communities, or people are certainly feeling that they're no longer being represented by Labour, that you're seeing parties filling the niche. You've recently got the Northern Independence Party, the Nippers, have popped up that are going to, they're playing the will they or won't they game at the moment with standing a candidate in Hartlepool. And if you haven't been following them on Twitter or keeping an eye on those guys on Twitter, they have ideas. They want to make their presence felt. And frankly, the longer that Labour continue to not make their presence felt, not offer anything, they're going to gain traction.
I mean, I really, really, really hope that the Northern Independence Party leader is called the King in the North. Uh,
Well, the hashtag Free the North has been going around quite a lot, but yeah,
uh,
if he ends up coming, if he ends up being called Rob Stark, then I will not. I literally will.
I mean, I would consider voting for Rob Stark. You know, he was all he was trying to take down that Southern elite. You know that.
Yeah. The parallels are there. The parallels are there.
So, do you see the possibility of the Labour Party splitting? Because there has been talk of this for quite a while, like a number of years. And they're having similar talks in America in on both sides of the aisle actually over there in terms of the Republican Party splitting and the Democratic Party splitting. Do you see that as a possibility in the UK, like in the near future, that we would get another party that will either split off from Labour or subsume a large portion of its vote?
Well, we saw what happened before in the early 80s when a splinter group split off from Labour, and it led to years and years of Tory rule. And
Hmm.
fundamentally, if the Labour Party split, you're looking at years and years of Tory rule. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a reason to try and hold Labour together. It's just simply the way our political system works in this country, and it's a rubbish system. But that's another argument.
Hmm.
A party that's so far to the right now that they're trying to ban our protest, and a Labour leader meekly saying nothing about it, is not bringing the party together, it's splitting it. And the only people that are particularly happy with Labour are those who cannot, right now, with under Kier Starmer's rule, they're going to be those people who aren't quite right wing enough to want to vote for the Tories or have some semblance of a conscience and can't in good conscience back them. But this sort of Tory light Labour that we've got again is will appeal to those, but it will drive away everybody else.
Hmm.
And as I said, Keir Starmer is causing such division when he promised unity that any split that happens is going to be down to him. No Labour leader worth his salt, like I said, should have to be dragged kicking and screaming to oppose the Tories. But here we are once more with people saying there's little between the two parties. And
Hmm.
that's not to say the entire Parliamentary Labour Party are bad. There are some brilliant examples of how great Labour can be. Outspoken critics of the party leadership, like the No Holding Back team that I mentioned earlier, Ian Laver and John Trickett, the Right to Food campaign, which has been spreading across the country, which has been spearheaded by the Liverpool MP Ian Byrne.
Hmm.
Great upcoming younger members of the party that are in Parliament, like Bel Ribeiro Addy or Zara Sultana or Afsana Begum, and there's more, but they are sadly in a massive minority. And we had a chance with Corbyn to set Labour on a better direction, and the party machine sabotaged that from within. It's very hard to see Labour ever getting back to that point. And I say that as a member, still hanging in there by my fingertips.
Hmm.
The abandonment of important issues and the people the party is supposed to represent has allowed others to fill that void, like that Northern Independence Party. And, you know, those elements of the party who are worth their salt need to act more, in my opinion. I think the left wingers, the socialist campaign group of Labour MPs, are too quiet. And, you know, as I said, I'm expecting the right wing of the party to bring the knives out for Keir Starmer when he fails in May. But it would be so much better if it was the socialist campaign group speaking out, and come May, come the local elections, if we have a fall, that they speak out first, they act first, and say he's got to go, because the damage is just being done over and over. And
Do you think
Keir
that's like a
Starmer's
really realistic
he's
possibility? Like
showing a kind of
he's
sorry.
been do you see that as a really realistic possibility? Because he has only been in power for a year. I mean, I'm skeptical that they would be happy to ditch him that quickly. But I mean, maybe you feel differently.
I think the damage he's done has been on such a huge scale and in such a small amount of time. It's crazy how quickly he just came to the left, and the decisions that he's made to suspend and purge, and appointing a general secretary who's basically acted of his own volition, without any semblance of being reined in at all, with an NEC election that we had there where they changed the way they count the ballots, so they got more right wingers onto the NEC, and that's made the NEC largely more and more powerless. From my perspective, in being able to hold Starmer to account. He just seems like he's on a hiding to nowhere. And as much as I don't like to point at polls repeatedly to say that, you can see that they're slipping in the polls and, 13 points behind in a recent poll in Survation poll, I think it was. When you're that far behind, this government, after the way they've screwed up and mismanaged the COVID crisis, should be telling the leadership something, that they are so far off the mark. They're so far away from the public mood, not just Labour members or left-wing moods, it's so far away from the moods of the general public that they're still prepared to back the Conservatives, to back Johnson after all the damage he's done, because they just see nothing in Starmer. One of the biggest problems Starmer has got, and it's something that gets raised about him time and again, is that nobody knows what he stands for. The general public is saying that, but so are Labour members.
I mean, it's definitely something that I've seen talked about. I've seen everything accusing him from being just a Tory in red to being, I've seen the articles from like the Express and stuff accusing him of being a hardcore Marxist, and which I always laugh at. It's amazing. I'm like, look, man, I know some hardcore Marxists.
Some of these papers are.
Yeah, I know some hardcore Marxists. Like, Kier Starmer is not one of them. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, or sign up to our mailing list. Thanks a lot to our sponsor, ExpressVPN, the #1 most trusted VPN. Get lightning fast connectivity with servers in 160 locations across 94 countries. Keep your browsing privacy safe with ExpressVPN and get a 35% discount on 12 months of ExpressVPN when you follow the link in the description below. Don't forget, my book is now out and available to order on Amazon and on bookshop.org. That's Brexit, the Establishment Civil War. And most importantly, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.